Some blood types seem to protect the heart better. Others carry more danger later in the brain. And none of them come without a downside, because the very place where your blood type gives you an advantage may also be the place where it leaves you exposed somewhere else. So the real question is not this: which blood type is best? It is this: where is the hidden weak spot in yours? Most people treat their blood type like a label, a letter, a category, something printed on a card that only matters in an emergency. But biologically, your blood type is more than that. It is closer to a recognition code on the surface of your cells, one your body is constantly reading. Not only in the blood, but also in blood vessels, in the gut, and in other tissues. That is why it can influence more than a transfusion. It can shape how your blood clots, how your immune system reacts, and where your body is better protected or more exposed. And here is the part most people never hear. Your blood type was not assigned randomly. It was selected over tens of thousands of years, by disease, by diet, by survival pressure. Each blood type is a solution to a specific moment in human history, and that solution is still running inside you today. So this is not just about 4 blood types. It is about what your blood type may give you and where it may also make you more vulnerable. Because with every blood type, the same question comes back. Where is your advantage and where does the weak spot begin? Blood types are based on antigens. These are microscopic markers on the surface of red blood cells. Very early in life, your immune system learns to recognize those markers as belonging to you. Blood type A carries one of them. Blood type B carries another. A B carries both. Type O carries neither of those 2 markers. That sounds technical. It is. But the important part is this: these markers do not appear only on red blood cells. They also show up in blood vessels, in the gut, and in other tissues. And that is where things become interesting. If one blood type tends to protect the heart and blood vessels a little better than the others, it is usually O. And to understand why, you have to go back a long way. Blood type O is the oldest of the main blood groups. It was already widespread when our ancestors were hunter-gatherers, constantly moving, hunting, exposed to injury and acute infection. In that world, what mattered was fast response, rapid wound closure, a body that could handle physical stress without collapsing. That is where its strength still shows up today. People with blood type O often have lower levels of certain clotting factors. In simple terms, the blood tends to stay a little more free-flowing and is somewhat less likely to form dangerous clots that block vessels. That is a real advantage. Because when it comes to longevity, the state of the heart and blood vessels matters enormously. But O does not get that advantage for free. Its weak spot often sits in the stomach. People with blood type O are more vulnerable to Helicobacter pylori, a bacterium that can settle into the stomach lining and promote inflammation, irritation, and ulcers there. If you have blood type O and have ever dealt with recurring stomach problems that no one could quite explain, this may be part of the reason. So the same blood type that may give the heart and blood vessels more room can carry more risk somewhere else. For blood type O, that means more protection for the heart and blood vessels, but more vulnerability in the stomach. So O shows something important. Protection in the circulation can come with a weak spot in digestion. With A, that balance shifts, because the world that shaped it was a completely different one. Blood type A is often associated with a strong immune response, but it pays for that strength somewhere else. It developed more strongly in densely settled agricultural communities, roughly 10 to 15,000 years ago. People were no longer moving. They were living close together, storing food, keeping animals nearby. New pathogens spread faster. New infections arrived that hunter-gatherers had never faced. In that environment, a more reactive immune system was an advantage. Blood type A appears to have offered exactly that. an immune profile better suited to the microbial pressure of early farming life. At first, that sounds like a pure benefit, and in part it is. But that is also where the risk begins. Blood type A is linked to a stronger tendency toward clotting. That means the blood can clump more easily, which can raise the risk of heart attack, stroke, and other vascular problems. And there is a second sensitive point: stress load. Blood type A appears to be more vulnerable to the long-term effects of chronic stress. Cortisol, the body's main stress hormone, may become a more persistent problem here when pressure and tension do not let up. If you have blood type A and have noticed that stress seems to hit you harder than it does others, not just mentally but physically, that pattern has a biological basis. That is the catch with A. Its strength lies in a strong immune defense. Its risk rises where a strong tendency toward clotting, vascular strain, and chronic stress come together. For blood type A, that means strong immune defense, but more risk from heightened clotting tendency and long-term stress. If A shows how strongly long-term stress can wear on the body, B tells almost the opposite kind of story. Here, the main issue is not constant pressure. It is how well a body can handle changing conditions, because that is exactly the world that shaped it. Blood type B often handles changing conditions better, but it may become more vulnerable later to inflammation inside the body. It carries the imprint of mobile, nomadic populations that moved across Central Asia thousands of years ago, adapting constantly to new food sources, new climates, new pathogens. Survival here did not depend on staying put and defending a fixed territory. It depended on flexibility. That is where its strength comes from. A body with blood type B can often deal more flexibly with changing environmental conditions than others. That is a real advantage. But that same flexibility has a downside. An immune system that adapts well can also be more likely to overreact. Then, it is no longer just about fighting off pathogens. It becomes about inflammation inside the body turning into the problem itself. That does not always show up right away. Often it appears later, quietly, gradually, without a clear trigger. And that is exactly why blood type B is harder to read. It can look stable for a long time. But the risk lies in the fact that over the years, silent inflammation, metabolic problems, or immune overreactions may become a chronic issue, especially when the body is constantly burdened with heavily processed food that this originally flexible system was never built for. For blood type B, that means more flexibility under changing environmental conditions, but also more risk when inflammation in the body no longer settles down. And then there is AB, the rarest blood type. Not just another variation, but the combination of two older systems that were never meant to merge. It appeared only recently in evolutionary terms, as populations that had been separated for thousands of years began to mix. And that is exactly why it becomes more complicated here. Because when two advantages come together, the risks do not disappear. They often just become harder to recognize. Blood type AB combines traits of A and B, but it may also carry the most complex risk profile of all. It is the youngest of the main blood groups. It did not emerge from a single survival pressure, the way O emerged from the demands of hunter-gatherer life, or A from the microbial world of early farming. It appeared as a byproduct of population mixing, a combination that evolution had not tested over thousands of generations. That is where its strength lies. The body carries both antigens and therefore has to deal with two different recognition markers at the same time. In some situations, the immune system responds less aggressively and can tolerate certain triggers better instead of reacting immediately and forcefully. At first, that sounds like an advantage, and in some ways it is. But that is also where the risk begins. Like blood type A, blood type AB is linked to a higher tendency toward clotting. The blood may clump more easily and put greater strain on blood vessels, raising the risk of stroke and other vascular problems. And then there is the more unsettling side of the story. Several large studies show that people with blood type AB face a higher risk of cognitive decline later in life. That does not just mean ordinary forgetfulness, it can mean a faster loss of memory, mental clarity, and thinking ability, up to a greater risk of dementia. That is what makes blood type AB so delicate, not because it is automatically the worst blood type, but because its risk sits exactly where people lose the most sense of safety in old age, in the brain. For blood type AB, that means greater tolerance towards certain triggers, but also a higher risk of vascular problems and cognitive decline. Up to this point, we have been talking about the main type of your blood group, but the code is still not fully read. There is another marker that usually stays invisible in everyday life and can still matter biologically: the rhesus factor. That is the plus or minus after your blood type. You can think of it as an extra label added to your blood group. Most of the time, you do not feel it at all, but biologically, it is not irrelevant. The rhesus factor helps determine how your immune system reacts to certain blood cells. It becomes especially important in pregnancy and blood transfusions. It is not the main code, but it is an important extra layer, and that is what makes the full picture clearer. A blood type is not just a neat letter on a card. It is a biological profile, shaped by tens of thousands of years of human history, with strengths, weak spots, and a second layer of coding that can matter in specific moments. Each blood type was a solution. O solved the demands of a world in constant physical motion. A solved the microbial pressure of early settled life. B solved the challenge of constant environmental change. A B arrived last, a combination that brought new tolerances and new vulnerabilities. No blood type is simply good, and no blood type is simply bad. Each one protects you somewhere, and each one can leave you exposed somewhere else. One tends to ease the burden on the heart and blood vessels, but becomes more vulnerable in the stomach. Another brings strong immune defense, but carries more risk through a heightened tendency toward clotting and chronic stress. A third copes better with changing environments, but becomes more vulnerable when inflammation in the body no longer settles down. And the rarest of all carries a difficult risk exactly where people lose the most security with age, in the brain. You cannot change this biological code, but you can stop ignoring its weak spots.